Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to talk about the top 5 premium ships that you might want to choose from the event campaign this year. This information will still be useful also if you pop a lockbox ship, or even if you're just grinding up EC or selling keys or whatever to buy a lockbox ship or promo ship. And real quick, I just want to mention in this event campaign, you could also choose 2 T6 Zen store coupons or 1500 Lobby. And the reason I wouldn't recommend, specifically would recommend against choosing the 2 T6 coupons, even though you can pick any 2 ships from the Zen store and get them account-wide, you can get T6 coupons either through the trading channel or by converting dilithium to Zen. And I know the exchange rate isn't super favorable, but it's definitely doable. And you can do that anytime. So using once a year choice to choose something that you can get just regularly seems like kind of a waste. And the total value of these 2 coupons is about $48 because you would always buy a ship on sale. Whereas the value of like the lockbox ship is a couple $100, or the cost it would take you to get 1500 Lobby is several $100s. So the value proposition is a lot higher for the premium choice or the Lobby. And I do want to mention, even though I'm not going to talk about Lobby specifically in this video, last year on my free-to-play account, I did choose Lobby because I picked the Zal Heavy Cruiser and the Walker Cruiser for the trait and console respectively. And the reason I did that was because those 2 ships I could fit into 1500 Lobby when there was a 20% Lobby sale, and the trait and the console from those benefited basically every build I had. And that's going to kind of play a role into my recommendations for the next part. Remember that a ship build, it's a sum of multiple parts, right? So you can't just pick a promo ship and immediately be effective in PvP. You have to have the underlying traits, consoles, gear, practice, knowledge, etc. to make it work. And as an added sort of plus, despite what people on Reddit might say, you don't really need... There aren't really any promo or lockbox ships that you really need to do PvP with. There are some nice things to get from those, but at the moment, especially with like the Hydra and the Seneca and the legendary Jem'Hadar, and Rhythmic Rumble from the Corvette, there's not a lot of stuff that you really want promo or lockbox ships for. And I'm really tired of seeing that post where people say that you need 5 promo ships or something to compete in PvP. That's ridiculous. It's kind of hard to do a top 5 list. It's hard to narrow down, but I am going to mention a couple of more specialized ship choices towards the end of the video. But for the top 5, I tried to pick ships that are useful on multiple types of builds. So the very first one, and we're on my main account here so I can show off some of these that I already have. But the very first one is the Mirror Strikewing Escort. And I talked about this one briefly in the last video because I think this is one of the best bang for the buck ships available in the game. The ship itself is pretty decent. It has, I don't have any gear equipped or anything, so it's kind of unbuffed here, but it has, basically you have this full commander tack, you have an intel seat, you have a temporal seat, and this lieutenant commander and this ensign are universal, so you're not really stuck with too much wasted space. There's not like too much tactical or too much engineering or the usual kind of things that ruin ships like this. The ship itself is definitely above average. You also get a trait, Superior Area Denial. Basically, whenever you use Scatter Volley or Fire at Will, you get a negative 30 damage resistance rating debuff applied to the target that you hit. So even if you don't have Hanger Pets, right, you get that negative 30 damage resist debuff. It's applied to your weapons when you fire, not your Hanger Pets. So even on ships that don't even have Hanger Pets, this is a really, really good trait. And the trick is you slot... If you're running a Beam Overload build and you have Beam Overload 3, and that's your main source of damage, you slot Scatter Volley, which gives your Beam Overload shots the buff from this ability. Does that make sense? I mean, that's pretty common build technique in PvP, is to slot Superior Area Denial, with a beam overload ship. And you're slotting scatter volley anyway for the colony consoles for the healing. So this just fits into the puzzle really, really well. And that debuff, negative 30 in PvP especially, is really, really powerful. You know, in PvE, so in PvE, NPC enemies have no resist, 0% across the board. So negative 30 debuff, especially when stacked with teammates that are also running debuff, it's not as noticeable. But when you're targeting a player that might have 75% resists, if you put in, and I have a calculator on the Discord, and I can link it in the description, if you put in negative 30 debuff on a player that has 75% resist, it's a huge drop. I mean, you know, if you drop someone's resist from 75% to say 60%, that means your damage, as well as everyone else on your team that's attacking that target, they all benefit from that damage reduction, you know, against your target. So it's just a really, really powerful trait. And if you want to build a carrier or something in PvE, then that's like a nice little added bonus that you get for having that trait as well. The second part is you get this universal console cascading subatomic disruptions. And this console can be boosted by EPG, as well as things that increase like bonus exotic. Like if you look, the primary target here, 25,900 electrical damage, right? If I also slot Delphic Tear, which adds 20% bonus exotic damage, you'll see that the damage has gone up. Now you're up to 30,800. As well as providing a negative 40 damage resistance rating, but that only lasts for 10 seconds. One of the advantages of SAD, like I was mentioning earlier, that negative 30, because it's on your weapons firing, it's basically being applied all the time. This one, it's only 10 seconds when you first hit, but it's a pretty powerful console. You can boost its damage quite a bit, and it's good on science builds for adding a little spike damage. You could use it on like a torpedo vapor. Electrical damage particularly hits shields really hard, so you could use it to like wipe out a shield facing right before you fire a torpedo or something like that. And it's just a really, really good console that you can use in a lot of different ways. So that's another advantage. And then the experimental weapon that comes on this ship is the Graviton Implosion Charges, and I've already taken this off and upgraded it and everything. This experimental weapon, basically, it deals a very large kinetic damage hit, but there's no shield pen, so it does get its damage severely reduced by a target that has its shields up. But in addition to the kinetic damage, which can hit pretty hard if the shield facing is down, it also does a negative 25 all damage resistance rating against the target, which again, like I said, it benefits your entire team attacking that target, and this thing fires every 4 seconds, and that debuff lasts 5 seconds. So you're able to apply that debuff with 100% uptime, essentially. And this little thing on the tooltip, it says decreases with distance from target. That's a lie. It's negative 25 all the time, 10 kilometers away or 1 kilometer away, it doesn't matter. So that's a particularly powerful weapon. I think the only major drawback to this one is that it does have a weapon power cost when firing, but if you're using Rhythmic Rumble, then the weapon power cost isn't really a big concern anyway. So this is just a really, really good weapon to use. And the last thing you get on this ship, in addition to all that other stuff, is you get the Mirror Universe Shuttlecraft Hangar Pets. So if you are running a Hangar Pet equipped ship or build or something, you get access to these little pets. And I don't have the Elite version unlocked on this particular character, but the Elite version of these, okay, they have an Array and an Omni and Beam Overload 3, so they actually deal a pretty good amount of damage. And they also have Tractor Beam 3, so they can be quite a nuisance. Like if you're fighting someone that's using these and you get tractored, you can't activate Intel Team, you can't cloak, and you know, they kind of whittle you away with Beam Overload damage. It's not a ton of damage, but you know, the enemy player is, you know, shooting you too. It's a good, really, really effective Hangar Pet. Alright, number 2 is the Atlas Prototype Dreadnought. And the reason I picked this ship, it's not a particularly good ship. You've got a Lieutenant Commander Temporal and only a Lieutenant Command, so it's not a good tank. It's not a good tort build. It's definitely not very good in PvP. It's objectively a below average ship, you know? But the trait is also super weak. In fact, I barely even remember what this is. Essentially, when you use a hull heal, it grants you a little extra power, but only when you're at full health, which is like, I mean, you can see here. So stacks 3 times. Okay, so you get an extra about 10 power. That's pretty bad. So the trait's basically worthless. But the reason for getting this ship is the console DPRM, or Dynamic Power Redistributor Module. And this console is a defensive console. So just to be clear on that, the main reason for using this console is that for 20 seconds you get 100 bonus damage resistance. So that's bonus damage resistance, right? If I activate it, it can exceed 75%, and I'll show that in just a second. It also gives 500% hull regen, which is a pretty massive amount of hull regen. So this is a hugely effective defensive console, and the main sort of like special thing about this console is it cannot be sub-nuked. So a lot of other defensive consoles like molecular phase inversion or crystalline absorption matrix, that kind of thing, if someone sub-nukes you, you lose the buff completely. And this console, even if you get sub-nuked, the buff is still active, so you're always regenning and you're always benefiting from the resistance. So it's really good. And there is an offensive component to it. You get 40% bonus damage while you're above 80% hull. 40% bonus damage isn't bad, but it's not the main reason you use this console. You usually don't see PvPers flying around activating this offensively, unless they're really sure that they're not going to be in trouble. But it's a great defensive console, and I'll show what it looks like when I activate it right here. So it's counting down 20 seconds, and normally a console that counts like this can be disabled early. So if it gets disabled, you just lose the buff. And this one, you've got it for the full 20 seconds, pretty much no matter what, unless you're killed through it, which has happened. You know, there's a lot of spike damage in PvP, but it's very good. As you saw, my resistances shot up quite a bit there. If I had higher base resistances already, like if I added a Pax Triburnium or something like that, and then activated it, I'm not going to make you wait 100 seconds, but I've seen this as high as 90% resistances. So if someone deals 100,000 damage to you and you only take 10k, that's pretty awesome. So really good choice there, number 2. All right, number 3 is the Discovery Timeline Constitution flight deck carrier. And in this particular case, I am using the Legendary variant, which is available from the 10th anniversary bundle. And the Legendary variant is a flat-out worse ship. You have a full Temporal seat and a Lieutenant Commander Temporal seat, and that's it. The one that you would choose from the event campaign, it's a full Miracle Worker ship, and it has a Lieutenant Command station, which is not all that useful. But it is a better ship, and you get an extra console slot and all that stuff. But I do not have that variant of the ship. It's a little too expensive for me. But since I have the 10th anniversary bundle, I just grabbed that out of the 10th pack. But the traits and consoles and everything are the same. So the main notable feature of this ship is the trait Plot Armor. So polarized, lattice, optimized titanium armor. Basically, whenever you take, and in PvP, this happens all the time. Whenever you take 20% of your max health within 5 seconds, and that's measured pre-resist. So if you have 100,000 hull and someone hits you for 20k damage, even if you resist that down to only 5,000 damage, it's still going to trigger the Plot Armor trait. And basically, for 15 seconds, it's like a giant hazard emitters. It's going to heal you a pretty large amount of hull over the duration. 250 damage resistance rating for everything, which is really big. And it also removes all hazard debuffs, damage over time effects, that kind of thing. Now, that's 15 seconds long, and then there's a 30-second cooldown window where you're not protected by this. But this trait is responsible for just a huge amount of healing, and it's used a lot on like support builds, science builds, carriers, healers, that kind of thing. And this trait can be buffed. So like right now it heals me for 47,000 hull. If I were to slot, let's see, Sustained Radiant Field from the Iconian rep, and that gives a 26% bonus to outgoing hull heals. That also increases plot armor. So now we're at 59,000 hull. And just for perspective, if I slot, say, like Troyus, and then let me grab the Regenerative Integrity Field, and then the Lucari, sorry, what's it called? Protomatter, Field Projector, and then Reiterative. So a bunch of healing consoles, right? Now if I hover over plot armor, it's 100,000 hull in 15 seconds. And I've seen it even higher than that. I mean, it gets buffed really, really high. It scales with hull restoration. It scales with percent healing bonuses like Biotech Patch or these consoles. So you can make it really, really powerful, or you can use it, you know, just for a small heal and resistance and the clearing of, you know, hazards and that kind of thing. So it's just a really useful trait that works in a lot of different builds. The console that comes on this ship, Reinforcing Squadrons, it's terrible. Basically, it gives you, spawns a couple of pets, gives the pets a little bonus damage. It's very weak. And so are the hangar pets, these Tactical Flyer Squadrons. If anything, all these really do is clutter up the map and make the game laggier. So if your objective is to try to lag out the map, which it seems like that is some people's objective, then by all means use these pets, use this console, whatever. But it's not exactly something I would recommend the ship for. On the other hand, a little added bonus, the ship comes with these advanced phaser beam arrays, and it also unlocks the ability to purchase more advanced phaser beam arrays from the, I think it's the Reclaim tab. Yeah, so you can get phaser or disruptor variants, and they cost dilithium to buy. But basically, the real advantage of these weapons is that instead of the standard phaser or disruptor proc, you have a 5% chance to grant crit severity, but that crit severity only applies to advanced phasers. And the number of advanced phasers you have slotted increases that amount. So let me just show, for example, I have a couple that are fully upgraded. If I start slotting these, you'll now see that the 5% chance for 50% crit severity with all 5 of these beams, and especially like these that I've re-engineered to crit damage times 4. I mean, this weapon could theoretically have 150% crit severity for 15 seconds, and if I'm running 3 of them, or 4 of them, or 5 of them, that's a pretty big buff. I mean, granted, if I'm only running 3, then it's 30%, but it adds up quite a bit, and especially like if you're doing a cruiser build, or if you're doing a surgical strikes build, or say you have like the Excelsior 2 or the legendary D7, right? 5-3 cruisers with full intel seats. You could run 5 of these or 6 of these or something pretty effectively with surgical strikes and benefit from a massive critical damage increase. So they're just really, 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 really powerful weapon. There's your extra bonus. Okay, number 4, and this is kind of an older one, but still really good, is the Section 31 Intel Science Destroyer. And the reason I chose this ship is, again, it's another one of those ships that just has a lot of benefits for a lot of different things on it. So it's a very versatile ship. So first of all, let's look at the BOF layout. You have these 2 commander stations, but only one is active at a time. So kind of similar to the Titan or the old Dyson ships, you have this little clicky button, tactical mode, and when you're in tactical mode, you have this commander rank ability, just like it says in the green text there. So in this case, it's beta 3. I probably would use something else, but both of these seats are full intel spec as well. So if you're in tactical mode, you could have Surgical Strikes 3 here, and then like whatever else intel abilities you want. Or if you're in science mode, you could put the Surgical Strikes in the science seat even and just stay in science mode. And then you benefit from the secondary deflector. When you're in tactical mode, the secondary deflector turns off, and the experimental weapon, like an Escort, turns on. So it's one or the other. You don't get both experimental weapon and secondary deflector at the same time. But you can switch modes. So going to tactical mode is instant. When you go back to science mode, so this is tactical mode, by the way. It lists the little nacelles tucked under. If you go back into science mode, there is a 30-second timeout before you can go back to tactical mode. So you can't like hot swap really rapidly. But you could set this up to be like a surgical strikes build or a science control build. You have this lieutenant commander universal station that you can mess with. And the real important thing about this ship, and the reason why it's still viable after all these years and all this time, is this tactical seat is also intel, so there's no wasted slot. So if you're doing a science build, then you would not slot any tactical abilities here. Maybe Torp Spread or something, or Omega. I mean, it depends on exactly what you're doing, but you don't have to is the key, right? Like if I, let me change this guy's specialization really quick. So like you could do Intel Team, Ionic Turbulence, evade target lock, and then surgical strikes. And surgical strikes would only activate when you're in tactical mode. And then in the science seat, you can stick to the usual stuff. You know, you got gravity well, you could do photonic officer, you got, I mean, you could use intel abilities if you want, like maybe EM pre-probe, tractor repulsors, viral impulse, burst, science team, polarized hull. Like there's just so many options really for this ship, because you could basically run it like a science build, or you could just assume that you're always going to use it in tactical mode and use it basically like your standard kind of double intel team, you know, surgical strikes escort build. Or you could even do like use it in science mode and then put I don't have it unlocked, but you could put Omega there, and then you could even do like beam overload, cannon scatter volley, leave intel team there, and then put your like evade target lock on this seat maybe. I guess other way around. Intel team, and then we'll put evade target lock here. So there you go. So now you've got an escort build, like a traditional colony console escort build with superior air denial or whatever, and beam overload, and you've got some science and intel abilities and stuff to throw into the mix. So it's just really, really versatile ship that you could do a lot of stuff on. And it's cool. I mean, the transform mechanics, like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of an ugly ship, in my opinion, but it's still sort of cool in, like, in the way that it, you know, can switch modes and stuff like that. Okay, so beyond the ship itself, the trait, Exodus Active Probat. So this trait, it used to be absurdly overpowered, like uncounterable overpowered. And that's not really the case anymore, because there's a lot of sources of perception now that we didn't have before. So like Intel Team, in this case Intel Team 3, grants 350 perception. And then Attack Pattern Lambda, like Lambda 3, grants 750 perception. And there's just a lot more sources of perception, right? Perception is the counter to stealth. So this extra 500 stealth, 500 and some stealth, isn't as powerful as it used to be when stealth was like the thing. However, it is still decently effective. Like, think of it this way. Say you're fighting somebody and they're using Colony Deflector and Attack Pattern Omega. So they have a lot of bonus damage and a lot of crit damage, and they can be a little bit more, they can have more spike damage because of that. If you use Exodus, then you kind of force them to slot Lambda or the Jem'Hadar Deflector or Intel Team if they weren't using it, that kind of thing. So you can kind of, even if there's not a direct benefit, like they're still able to target and hit you, you're still forcing them to kind of lower their damage output to even the playing field. So there's still, you know, some viability to that part of the trait. But the other parts of the trait are also pretty nice. So you get 15% bonus damage. There are traits that have more bonus damage than this, like the new 5 Magics trait that I mentioned if you're running Disruptors. You could use Superior Pedal to the Metal, which is 30% bonus damage, that kind of thing. But 15% is not bad. And then you also get 40 control expertise. So that extra 40 control If you're running a science build, you could use it to improve your science abilities, your holds, your slows, that kind of thing. Or if you're running, an escort and you have evade target lock, like evade target lock, by default, the untargetable time is 6 seconds. That does scale up with control. So an extra 40 control, that would make that, 7 seconds or 7.5 seconds, something like that. So if part of your build is high control, this trait also benefits that kind of thing. And then the console that it comes with, the enhanced tractor drone. So this console gives you a passive accuracy and EPG, so that's good for like, the accuracy is not bad for like a dogfighter. The EPG may be good for like control or exotic build. But the main thing that's cool about it is it has basically you get 3 charges, so you can use it multiple times and they recharge every 40 seconds. It doesn't benefit from unconventional systems, so in the modern unconventional system kind of environment, it's not as powerful as it once was, but it severely reduces the turn rate and flight speed of whoever you tag with it. Basically, it's like a little blue purpley beam grappling hook thing that hits your target. And more importantly, besides the turn rate and speed reduction, it also prevents them from activating cloaks or intel team, that kind of thing. So if your target is using, just for example, Exodus, right, you can hit them with enhanced tractor drones and they can't activate intel team for a few seconds. And it gives you a window of opportunity to deal some big damage to them while they're slowed down and while they can't activate intel team. So it's a pretty good console for that kind of thing. I've used it in 1v1s, like on a dogfighter, and it's good for that. I've used it in control builds as well to try to like slow someone down and prevent them from getting out of other holds. It's a pretty good console. It's useful in a lot of things. And then the other added bonus on this ship is the invasive coil gun. So the invasive coil gun experimental weapon, you can obviously use on any ship with an experimental weapon slot, like your Hydras or your Jem'Hadar attack ships or whatever. And basically you have this kinetic damage hit that isn't, like, just for perspective, it's a lot smaller of a kinetic damage hit than the graviton implosion charges from the Strike Wing Escort that I mentioned earlier. But it does have 50% shield penetration, so even though the hit is smaller, you are penetrating shields more. It also fires every 3 seconds instead of every 4 seconds like graviton. But the main highlight of this weapon is that for every 5 attacks on the same target, so with a 3-second cycle time, it takes 15 seconds for this to happen. So every 15 seconds, plus or minus, as long as you can stay focused on the same target, it's going to disable all of their subsystems. And this scales, I can't remember if it scales with control or drain. One of those two. Let's see really quick, actually, because I have a Drain X console. So what was it, 4.7 seconds? Yeah, now it's 5 seconds. So if I've got a couple of Drain consoles on, now the subsystem offline is 6 seconds. So there you go. Scales with Drain. If you knock someone's subsystems offline for 6 seconds, and granted the duration of that will be a little less because players resist subsystem offline effects, but knocking all subsystems offline, that's weapons, engines, shields, aux, everything. If that happens to coincide with a big hit from you, spike damage or whatever, that could pretty much mean a kill. So you're kind of playing that chance every 15 seconds. You're hoping that you'll land a big hit in that little window every 15 seconds. So it's a pretty good experimental weapon and definitely worth using. And another thing about it is, again, I talk about like non-selfish build choices, especially when it comes to team combat, which is kind of my focus. When you're in a 5v5, if you and your teammates are all attacking the same target and you hit him with this and your target's subsystems all go offline, all of your team is attacking that target. So the odds are one of you is going to land a big hit in that little gap when their subsystems are offline. So it's a great weapon also to use that benefits your whole team, kind of similar to the way that Graviton Implosions benefits your whole team from the resistance debuff. All right, and here is my number 5 pick, and I'm actually piloting the Tier 5 version here, the regular Wells. And that is because, and this is a really ancient build, I had this ship from a really long time ago. It used to be that you could buy this ship super, super cheap from a T5 box. There's still a couple on the exchange, but they've gotten a lot more expensive, like 400 million or something like that. So it's maybe worth considering that if you have the EC. But the reason why I recommend this ship, and I for some reason didn't slot it even though I had it on here. The Verne is the Tier 6 version that you would choose from the event campaign. But that ship, the ship itself, in the case of the Verne, it's basically the same buff layout, except you have a full Temporal commander and a Lieutenant Commander Temporal as well. And it's all either universal or science seeding. So it's extremely, extremely effective for PvE science builds. I'm not sure it would be my first choice for a PvP science build, although it definitely could be done. But even this Tier 5 version, it's really, really good. I mean, I would use science, slots for all these seats, but it's definitely like a cool build. There's not many ships in the game that have this level of science seeding. The trait on the Verne is kind of terrible. If you're going over a certain impulse speed, it's like some electrical damage. I don't know. I don't even remember because it's bad. But the reason to get this ship, Tier 5 or Tier 6 version, is for the Tippler cylinder console. So Tippler cylinder, as not part of the set, just the console itself. I don't have the set. But basically, it makes you untargetable for 7 seconds, and it plays this little animation. I'll demonstrate it in a second here. But it plays this animation where your ship kind of moves backwards like a rewind effect. And during that 7 seconds, it heals you. You can't be targeted or damaged. And it also cools down all of your other abilities, like bridge officer abilities, captain abilities, universal consoles, all that stuff. So let me demonstrate that just to sort of show just how effective that is. So I'm going to put on my top row, I'll put charge particle burst, I'll put co-opt energy weapons, and then let me grab a universal console of some kind that I can use here in regular space. I'll use DPRM because that's a good example. We already talked about DPRM a little bit, right? So okay, so I got Tippler cylinder right here in the middle. Okay, so I can't do co-opt. How about sensor scan? Okay, perfect. All right, so if I hit sensor scan, I hit DPRM. I'll wait for that 20 seconds to time out there. Alright, so both of those are now on cooldown, and then charge particle burst, or any buff abilities, right? All this stuff is on cooldown, and you hit Tippler cylinder, and it plays this little animation effect. And if you look at these, look at how they're cooling down. Look, I hit global already on charge particle burst. This went down to 20-something seconds, and I got about half of my recharge back on DPRM as well. So if you're running a ship that has multiple universal consoles, Tippler cylinder is really, really good because it just cools down all of your stuff. It's a really nice reset to kind of get you back in the fight. One kind of drawback to this console, if you notice that the bar that's moving down, it's horizontal instead of like a clock, like a wheel like this one. And that is because the temporal backstep ability, it has a 2-minute global minimum cooldown. So even with unconventional systems or whatever, you can't use this any more often than every 2 minutes. But it's so powerful and so effective when you use it with the right time. And it works on many different builds. You could use it on a science build, you could use it on a Hydra, you could use it on a Jem'Hadar, Dogfighter, anything that uses universal consoles basically, which is all PvP builds. It's a solid choice, and that's why it's my number 5 slot. So those are my top 5, and again, those are 5 ships that offer something that's beneficial to multiple build types. But I do want to name a couple of picks that are more specialized for like specific types of builds. So the first one on the kind of specialized list, and mostly because the cost to acquire this ship, because it's a promo ship otherwise, is kind of expensive. But the Vaudoir Juggernaut, you know, is just a really good platform. You can use it for PvE, scatter volley, insanity. I have like this was for an event, like a rapid fire kind of theme build. But the main reason for picking up this ship, PvE reasons aside, is for the trait Weapon Emitter Overdrive. So Weapon Emitter Overdrive, 50 accuracy, and 10% crit chance to any energy weapons. And that 10% crit chance, because of the way it's applied, where it only affects energy weapons, so like when using any beam or cannon ability, right? Let me look at my stat page. My crit chance is 31.8%. If I activate a beam or cannon ability, you'll notice that my accuracy went up, but my crit chance didn't. That's not because this trait is bugged. It's not 10% global crit chance, which is what shows on your stat screen. It's 10% crit chance for energy weapons only, which isn't shown on your stats page anywhere. And the nice thing about that is if you're attacking someone that's running, say, critical deflection, this 10% is not affected by that. You always have this 10% crit chance. So on my build right here, if someone was using critical deflection and I shot them and I had 31.8%, I only get 7.9% crit chance against them, which is pretty low. But with the trait slotted, that's another 10%, 17, almost 20%, which is a noticeable difference, especially like in a more, I only have 2 Romulans, for example, so I don't have like a 5 Romulan buff layout. You could make it even more effective. So that's a really, really good trait. And that extra accuracy also means you don't have to spend accuracy on, you know, slotting consoles that increase accuracy. Like I would still use Hostile Acquisition, but like I can't even remember if I have this. Nope. Okay. Well, like the Ultimate Swarmer or Weapon Sensor Enhancer Lobby consoles get you a lot of accuracy as well, but they're Lobby consoles, so they're expensive. And with 50 accuracy from this, you don't really need the accuracy from those consoles. Now, the trade-off is you could pick one of those consoles instead, and then instead of this trait, run something that's like more flat damage buff. You know, like Exodus or 5 Magics or, you know, whatever. But it's just a good trait to have as an option, and a lot of Beam Overload Dogfighters use this. And the only kind of drawback to this trait, if you notice, the weapon power drained by weapons is increased by 50%. So when it's slotted, it does increase your weapon power drain quite a bit. But that can be mitigated. You could use like isomags. Now that those exist, isomags increase your weapon power. And if you're running Rhythmic Rumble, your weapon power cost is probably like negative 200% or better anyway. So as long as you're running Rhythmic Rumble, that basically counters the weapon power cost from this trait, and you're mostly just getting the benefits from it. So really, really good trait option. And then another choice kind of related to the Dogfighter thing is the Deimos Pilot Destroyer. So let's switch to that really quick. I'll show you what that looks like. So the Deimos Pilot Destroyer, kind of cool looking ship, real thin. You got pilot rolls and all that other stuff. It's got a really favorable bridge officer layout. So this is actually the setup that I'm running on it currently. It's very, very similar to the legendary Jem'Hadar ship. So the main reason I would recommend against getting this ship actually is I think it would be better. I think the Jem'Hadar ship is just a little bit better than this one. And you can see that the build I'm running on this actually, I'm running backstep on this build, just like we talked about before. And I built this ship before I had DPRM. Actually, the event campaign choice from last year, I finally redeemed it just recently, and I got DPRM for this character. That's how I was able to show you the Atlas. But it's a pretty good ship. It's got, you know, decent hull capacity. You got, you know, Rhythmic Rumble, you got crazy resistances, Beam Overload, all that stuff. The trait that comes on it's terrible, this formation flying thing. But you do get a really cool console, the Immolating Phaser Lance. So this Phaser Lance, a little bit of extra phaser damage and shield penetration, and it is buffed by Cat 1 phaser damage. So just an example, right now the phaser damage is 27,400, right? If I unequip these colony consoles that are phaser damage, then you'll see that that damage drops. Now it's only 21,000 phaser damage. But you get 6 charges on this, and you can fire it every 5 seconds. And those charges come back every 20. So in sustained combat, you can fire this thing off pretty often. It's pretty powerful, and it hits pretty hard. The only thing I don't like about it is because it's not technically a ship weapon, it doesn't benefit from shield pen, which is kind of funny because this console even gives you passive shield pen a little bit. I mean, that much shield pen, that's like 2%-ish, slightly more than 2% shield pen, which isn't really that much to begin with. But, if you're doing a shield pen style build, maybe with like one big happy fleet or self-modulating fire, this console does not benefit from it. What this console is good for is wiping out a shield facing so that the rest of your weapons can hit bare hull. So even if you're not flying a traditional like Dogfighter style build, you could use this console kind of in the same way that I talked about cascading subatomic disruptions before, but this one you can fire more often. So if you hit somebody shield facing with this and all of that damage is dealt to the shield facing, you can wipe out a shield facing and then boom, there's your direct to hull hit with a torpedo or even just energy weapons, but whatever. It can be a very useful tool to have, especially if you have other ships from this list already. The other kind of specialized choice is this Herc Vedcrid Hive Healer. So this ship, the main reason to get it is it has a just massive hull capacity of 1.7x. It is the highest in the game hull modifier. So even just sitting here passively, I'm at 183,000, and then I would get obviously more than that with Threatening Stance or Unified Engineering or Consumables, all that stuff. And the main reason for running a ship like this is that it makes for a really excellent healer platform. You have a full command seat, which allows you to spread Suppression Barrage around, and the ability to do like Hazard Emitters 3, or you could slot control effects or abilities or whatever. This build is on my channel already, and it's been copied 1,000 times. The biggest drawback really to this ship, I think, is that you have this Lieutenant Commander tactical seat, and on a healer there's not a lot of tactical abilities you really want. Tac Team is good because like the trait Team Synergy, which is on all my healer builds, your allies also get your team abilities. So like if I hit Tactical Team on myself, my teammates also get a copy of Tactical Team, right? And Tactical Team actually clears Suppression Barrage. So if the other team is running a Suppression Barrage healer, you can actually negate that in a way by running Tac Team yourself. But other than that, like Fire at Will is useful for spreading Suppression Barrage. And the reason I have Omega here is this immune to movement debuffs and disables thing. And it's the best I had for that slot. I guess you also could run like Beta 2, which would debuff all the enemy's damage resistances, but then you lose the defensive measure of Omega. But there's a couple of different options for that seat. But it's a really cool ship. The ship itself is the only reason really to get this. So this trait is really, really weak. It only works on enemies within 3 kilometers, which is kind of tough to really make happen. And the repel effect, it's funny, but it doesn't really deal that much damage. 3,000 physical damage. It's just going to be absorbed by shields and resistances anyway. And the console that comes on it is this one. Energy Nullifier Disperser. And I tried to use this actually for a little while, and I just sort of messed with it, but it spawns these energy nullifier things. They're all over the place. 32 of them in like a big web, but they only last for 15 seconds. So unless somebody flies basically headfirst straight into one, they're not going to get hit by it. Which is a shame because I liked the idea of this console, maybe even for like a control build, because negative 50 engine power, if multiple of them hit, you could knock somebody's engine power completely out rather quickly, but in practice, they just don't hit. And if it was more like a mine, like if you deployed the nullifiers and they lingered for a long time, then I could see how it could be effective. But usually what happens when I use this in the past is it deploys the nullifiers everywhere in a big web, and then the fight moves and it's happening 10 kilometers away anyway, and then, you know, 15 seconds later they all just despawn and it was totally wasted console slot because it didn't do anything. So not my favorite console slot. It is, so some ships have a unique ability. Like, people are familiar with like the lance that's built into some ships, and I don't think most of the other ships I mentioned didn't really have a unique ability, but this one, and it's not shown anywhere. I think, I'm not even really sure how to check this, but it has an innate, let me bring up the wiki actually. Good, I already had it open. Here we go. Okay, automated defense screen. So it has this innate ability called automated defense screen, and basically every shield facing has a chance to add these stacks. Every time you take damage, you get a stack of this, and the stacks are independent of shield facing. So if you get hit in the front or the side or whatever, they're all independent stacks. And so as you're taking that damage, it increases your damage resistance rating along that facing. And then once you get 4 stacks, you get a 5-second immunity to that facing. So like if someone is shooting you from the side over and over and over again, eventually you're going to be completely immune to damage on that facing for 5 seconds. Now there's a 30-second lockout, so it's not guaranteed all the time. But constant immunities in various facings, especially in PvP where you're constantly maneuvering and twisting and turning around each other, it's really, really effective. I mean, considering you just get this with the ship, it's not even an ability you have to activate, it's not a console you have to activate, it's just on all the time. And there are definitely times where, like, I haven't flown my Herc in a while, but when I've been on the attacking side, you know, there are definitely times when I'm fully buffed and I fly in and, you know, pew pew, I land my hits and I think I'm going to deal a bunch of damage and I just see immune pop up a bunch of times, and it's because that immunity shield, you know, basically saved him on that side, and then I kind of have to go back and reposition and all that. So it's just a really, really powerful ship for building a healer on. Okay, and my last specialized choice, and this is for science control ships, is the Parliament Surveyor Cruiser. So the ship itself, it is a double Miracle Worker cruiser. Nothing particularly noteworthy or special. In fact, it's another one of those ships that's definitely in the below average category, because you're stuck with this maximum lieutenant tactical seat. So another one of those ships, way too much engineering. It's nice to have the Miracle Worker seating, but double Miracle Worker, it's not really that great. And the trait as well, I haven't even unlocked it. But let's see, it gives you a little bit of power. Yeah, I mean, whatever. A little bit of extra power, not a big deal. But the reason for getting the ship for a control build, if you're running like an Anorax or a Damosh or, you know, a Scryer, whatever science control build of choice you've chosen, this console, Controlled Gravimetric Demolition, which most people just call Parliament or, you know, Blue Bubble or whatever, and you've seen these in a lot of my arena footage videos, I'm sure. Big blue bubble with kind of hexagon pattern around it. It's a large area of effect, a 5-kilometer sphere, and it disables your engines, your target's engines, basically. So, and it can't really be very well countered, which is what makes it so powerful. So it doesn't do a lot of damage or anything like that, but, you know, if you're building a control build and you get somebody slowed down and you cast this, it will basically lock them in place and they can't move for a few seconds, and they have to get out of that. And a couple of easy ways to get out of this, I'll just name them right now. If you hit evade target lock or backstep or Elachi rift jump or fluidic phase decoupler or personal wormhole or anything that has like a phase out or an untargetable or anything like that, you can just activate that and fly right out of this. But the thing is, all of those are abilities that have a limited effect, right? So say you're chasing someone and they've already used their Elachi rift and they've already used evade target lock and all that stuff is on cooldown, and you catch them in this, they might be stuck there for 5 or 10 seconds before they can get out. And that doesn't seem like long, but this is PvP. If you get stuck in that bubble and your teammates, if you free someone in that bubble and your teammates are all shooting them, they're in a lot of trouble. I mean, it's happened to me a few times. There's a couple of instances that I can think of where like I've been trapped in the bubble and either died or barely escaped because of it. It's an incredibly effective console, and it's kind of similar to the way that Parasitic Ice works. Parasitic Ice obviously is a lot cheaper because it's like 2 million on the exchange, whereas the Parliament console obviously requires an entire lockbox ship. But they work the same way, right? So this one, it's 20 seconds instead of 30 seconds, but it disables the target's engines. And the only way to get out of this one, so even if your engines are disabled, if you hit engineering team or battery or whatever, it will not get you out of this. I don't know why, or if they'll fix that or something. It seems like a mistake bug to me, but untargetable things or just outright speed will get you out of these things. Like when you get hit by ice or the Parliament bubble, there's like a half-second delay before the effect actually sort of like deploys. And if you're moving at 500 impulse speed, it's going to deploy behind you because of just lag in general. So high speed will help you get out of these things. But obviously, as a science control pilot, if you're running one of these consoles on a science build, you would want to slow down your target first and then use these consoles at the appropriate moment. I mean, that's the theme of PvP in general, right? Is using your consoles and abilities at the right time, not just spamming them whenever. So that's my pick for the best ship to choose if you're doing a Psi control build. But of course, that's assuming that you already have a science ship that you're using, like the Scryer or the Damosh, that kind of thing. Obviously, there's tons of other cool ships to choose from. So just, you can pick whatever you like best. It's pretty hard for me not to put ships that I like personally, like the Temporal Talus, or the Anorax, or the Marianne, or the Undine Chirax on this list, but they just aren't as good in terms of bang for the buck performance. So even though I love the aesthetics of those ships, or the theme of those ships, I'm kind of coming at this from the mindset that I am working on my free-to-play account for. And my free-to-play account, it's only going to get one choice. Might be the only lockbox ship that account ever gets. So I wanted to choose something, if I could only have one ship ever, and I'm potentially going to do multiple builds on that character, what ship is going to have the biggest impact on that character in those future builds? And I'll probably end up picking something that has multiple benefits. And I am going to do a build video soon on my free-to-play now that I've kind of accumulated some resources and finished the event campaign on that. So that'll be probably my next video. Again, thank you for watching, and have a good one. Bye.